8:04 in the morning. The Taiwan Strait. The USS Gerald R. moved through the choppy gray waters at 22 knots. This was a routine transit until the world beneath the waves simply disappeared. Inside the Combat Information Center of the nuclear-powered carrier, the green glows of the sonar consoles did not flicker. They did not fail. They turned into a solid and unmoving wall of white noise. The acoustic signature of the entire ocean had been replaced by a digital scream that no one could hear, but every sensor could see. It was an absolute impossibility of physics. The sonar supervisor stared at his screen. He was a veteran of 12 years. He had seen thermal layers. He had seen biological interference from whale pods. He had never seen this. He keyed his internal headset. "Captain, we have a total acoustic whiteout. It is not just the Ford. The escorting destroyers are reporting the same. We are deaf." The captain of the Ford stood at the center of the bridge. He looked out over the flight deck where two F-35 fighters were preparing for a practice launch. The sky was clear. The wind was steady from the north. Everything looked normal, but his ship was now sailing over a blind abyss. "Status of the USS Higgins?" the captain asked. The tactical action officer responded immediately. "The Higgins reports sonar failure across all arrays. Their towed array is dead." The USS Howard reports the same. "It is a fleet-wide suppression. It is perfectly synchronized." 60 miles to the west, a Chinese People's Liberation Army Navy submarine moved at a depth of 100 meters. It was a Type 0905 Shang-class boat. Inside the cramped and humid attack center, the Chinese commander faced the same nightmare. His sonar operators were pulling their headsets away from their ears. The sound was a high-pitched electronic whine that defied the capabilities of their equipment. The Chinese commander spoke in a low and disciplined voice. "Is it an American acoustic weapon?" The operator shook his head. "Negative. Our sensors indicate the source is everywhere. It is not coming from the American strike group. It is coming from the water itself. We are blind. We cannot navigate the shoals at this speed. Bring us to 5 knots. The commander ordered. If the Americans are doing this, they are blind too. No one can fight in this silence. Back on the Ford, the minutes began to crawl. 1 minute passed, then 2. The tension in the Combat Information Center was a physical weight. The acoustic whiteout was absolute. The ocean was normally a riot of sound. There should be the grinding of distant cargo ships. There should be the clicks of dolphins. There should be the steady thrum of their own 4 massive propellers. Now, there was nothing but the wall of white noise. The admiral of the strike group arrived on the flag bridge. He did not look at the maps. He looked at the clock. It was now 8:08 in the morning. 4 minutes of silence. "This is a strategic event," the admiral said. "Assume we are under shadow. Assume an adversary has deployed a new form of wide-area denial. Signal the fleet to move to a defensive box. If we cannot see them, we must make it impossible for them to approach." The fleet began to turn. Hundreds of thousands of tons of steel shifted in the water. They were moving by GPS and dead reckoning alone. Below them, the silence continued. It was a heavy and suffocating blanket. The technological pride of 2 great nations had been rendered useless by a sound that should not exist. 8:11 in the morning, 7 minutes of silence. The sonar supervisor on the Ford watched his screen with an intensity that made his eyes ache. He was looking for a gap. He was looking for a flaw in the noise. He found nothing. "It is too perfect," he whispered to himself. "Nature is not this clean." The morning was still quiet. It would not stay that way. 8:12 in the morning. The middle of the Taiwan Strait. The USS Gerald R. was a $5 billion instrument of national power. Now, it was a drifting giant. For 8 minutes, the world's most sophisticated underwater sensors had been useless. On the bridge, the silence was more terrifying than the sound of incoming missiles. The admiral watched the seconds tick by on the digital bulkhead clock. 8 minutes and 12 seconds. 8 minutes and 13 seconds. The admiral turned to the captain. "We are in the narrowest part of the strait. If a submarine is within 5 miles, we would not know it. If they are preparing to fire, we are defenseless." The captain nodded. "The destroyers are holding their positions in the screen. We have the Howard and the Higgins on our flanks, but they are just as blind as we are. I have authorized the launch of 2 Seahawk helicopters. Maybe their dipping sonar can penetrate whatever this is. High above the carrier, a Seahawk helicopter hovered. The pilot looked down at the churning wake of the fleet. He spoke into his radio. Control, this is Easy Rider 1-1. We are deploying the sensor. Lowering now. The winch groaned as the sonar transducer dropped toward the water. It broke the surface. The crew in the back of the helicopter watched their screens. They expected the same white noise. Instead, they saw nothing. The display was black. The sensor operator spoke. Pilot, it is not noise anymore. It is a vacuum. The water is not returning any signal at all. It is like the ocean has been emptied of sound. Inside the Chinese submarine, the atmosphere was suffocating. The air was thick with the smell of hydraulic fluid and recycled oxygen. The commander stood behind the sonar operator. He watched the man's hands tremble. The operator looked up. Commander, the interference is changing. It is pulsing now, every 10 seconds. It feels like a heartbeat. The commander leaned in. Is it a signal? Is it a code? Negative, the operator said. It is too powerful to be a code. It is vibrating the hull. Can you feel it? The commander placed his hand against the cold steel of the pressure hull. A low, rhythmic thrumming was vibrating through the ship. It was not the sound of a propeller. It felt like the earth itself was breathing. He spoke to his executive officer. If this is an American experiment, they have lost control of it. No machine built by man can vibrate a hull at this depth without an immense power source. Prepare to surface. We cannot stay down here if our sensors are being overwhelmed. The executive officer hesitated. If we surface, the Americans will have a clear shot. We are in the middle of their strike group. We are already dead if we stay down here, the commander replied. Blow the tanks. We are going up. Back on the forward, the sonar supervisor noticed the change at the same time. The white noise on his screen began to thin. The digital wall was breaking apart. He shouted over the quiet hum of the Combat Information Center. The interference is dropping. Signal strength is returning. 9 minutes. Exactly 9 minutes. The admiral leaned forward. Report. What do you see? The sonar supervisor's face went pale. His hands froze over the keyboard. The white noise vanished. In its place, 14 bright yellow icons bloomed across the display. They were not there 9 minutes ago. Contacts, the supervisor stammered. 14 new contacts, all within 3,000 meters of the carrier. They are not submarines. They are too small. And they are moving. The admiral looked at the screen. The icons were arranged in a perfect circle around the USS Gerald R. Ford. They were waiting, the admiral whispered. The circle began to close. 8:13 in the morning. The South China Sea. The Combat Information Center of the USS Gerald R. Ford was no longer silent. It was a hive of controlled aggression. Officers shouted over the hum of cooling fans. Computer processors whirred as they struggled to classify the 14 new icons on the main tactical display. The icons were staggered in a perfect geometric ring around the carrier strike group. They were not drifting with the current. They were station-keeping. The sonar supervisor spoke into his headset. His voice was tight. Bridge. Combat. I have no acoustic data on these contacts. I repeat, 0 decibels. There is no propeller noise. There is no pump whine. There is no flow noise over a hull. They are ghosts. The admiral leaned over the supervisor's shoulder. Then how are we tracking them? Active sonar returns only, sir, the supervisor replied. We are bouncing sound off them and getting a rock-solid return. They are metallic. They are solid. But they are making no sound of their own. It is like they are not even running engines. The tactical action officer cut in. Admiral, the USS Howard reports the same. They have 3 contacts within 2,000 meters of their port beam. The Howard is requesting permission to prosecution with active dipping sonar from their Seahawk. Denied, the admiral snapped. I do not want anyone dropping a torpedo until we know what we are looking at. If these are Chinese unmanned vehicles, they are trying to draw us into a fight. 60 miles away, the Chinese commander of the submarine Great Wall 411 was facing the same impossible tactical map. On his screen, the 14 contacts were also visible, but from his perspective, they appeared to be protecting the American carrier. The Chinese sonar operator looked at his commander. "Sir, the contacts are not American. Look at their depth. They are at 600 meters. No American unmanned vehicle can maintain 30 knots at that depth without making a sound. Our sensors are the best in the fleet. We should hear their bearings grinding. We should hear something." The commander gripped the edge of the chart table. If they are not American, then whose are they? The Russians do not have this technology. No one does. He turned to his communications officer. "Signal Northern Fleet Command. Tell them we have an unidentified swarm in the strait. Tell them the Americans may be testing a new silent drive. Request instructions on engagement." Back on the Ford, the situation was deteriorating. The 14 contacts began to move. They did not move like ships. They shifted position with a sudden, violent grace. One moment they were at 400 meters. 2 seconds later, they were at 100 meters. The sonar supervisor shouted, "Contact change. They are rising. All 14 targets are coming up at 60 feet per second. They are going to break the surface." The admiral grabbed the rail of the command bridge. "All ships. This is Strike Group Command. Move to Weapon Engagement Zone 3. Flood all tubes. But do not fire. I repeat, do not fire unless a contact makes an aggressive move." On the surface of the Taiwan Strait, the water began to boil. It was not the white foam of a surfacing submarine. It was a smooth, rising mound of water. It looked like a giant glass lens pushing up from the depths. The captain of the Ford looked out through the reinforced glass of the bridge. "There," he pointed, 1,000 yards out, port side. A dark, metallic shape broke the surface of the gray water. It did not splash. It did not have a wake. It was a smooth, seamless teardrop of matte black material. It was 50 feet long. It had no windows. It had no railings. It had no markings. It sat in the water, perfectly still, defying the 5-foot swells of the strait. 13 more shapes broke the surface around the fleet. They formed a silent, black picket line. They were between the Americans and the Chinese. They were between two of the most powerful militaries in human history. The radio in the Ford's Combat Information Center crackled to life. It was not a voice. It was a series of digital pulses. The computer system on the Ford attempted to translate the signal. It failed. Then, a voice came over the open bridge frequency. It was not a human voice. It was a synthesized, flat tone that sounded like 1,000 voices speaking at once. The voice said only one thing. "The strait is closed. 8:15 in the morning. The Taiwan Strait." The bridge of the USS Gerald R. Ford was as cold as a tomb. The admiral stared at the black teardrop sitting motionless in the water. It was less than 1,000 yards away. The message was still echoing through the ship's communication systems. "The strait is closed." It was a declaration of sovereignty over international waters. It was a challenge that no American commander could ignore. The admiral turned to his communications officer. "Trace that signal. Was it a digital injection into our systems, or was it a broadcast?" "It was both, sir," the officer replied. The signal originated from all 14 contacts simultaneously. It did not use a radio tower. It used a localized gravitational pulse to vibrate our own antennas. Our systems did not receive the message. They were forced to create it. The captain of the Ford stepped forward. "Admiral, we are on a collision course with the lead contact. At our current speed and heading, we will strike that object in 4 minutes. We are a 100,000-ton carrier. That thing is the size of a school bus. If we hit it, we will crush it. Maintain course," the admiral ordered. "We do not yield to unidentified craft in international waters. This is a freedom of navigation operation. If they want to block us, they have to stay in our way." 30 miles to the west, the Chinese destroyer Nanchang was racing toward the scene. On the bridge of the massive Type 055 cruiser, the Chinese Rear Admiral was equally uncertain. He watched the radar feed. The 14 black objects were perfectly spaced. They formed a line that cut the strait in half. The Chinese admiral spoke to his staff. "The Americans are not slowing down. They are going to ram the contact. If that object belongs to us, we must defend it. If it does not belong to us, we must see what happens when it is struck." Beijing is demanding a classification, his chief of staff said. They are asking if these are American stealth drones. They want to know if this is a blockade. "Tell Beijing we do not know," the admiral replied, "but we will not let the Americans be the only ones to investigate. Increase speed to 30 knots. We will intercept the northern end of that line." Back on the ford, the distance was closing. 500 yards. 400 yards. The black teardrop did not move. It sat in the swell, rising and falling with the waves. It looked like a piece of polished volcanic glass. There were no engine exhausts. There was no heat signature on the infrared cameras. The tactical action officer spoke up. "Admiral, the rules of engagement are clear. We have not been fired upon. The contact is a hazard to navigation, but it is not showing hostile intent. We cannot fire. We do not need to fire," the admiral said. "We are the biggest ship in the world. We will push it aside. 100 yards." The crew on the flight deck of the Ford leaned over the railings. They watched the black shape disappear under the massive, towering bow of the carrier. There was no sound of impact. There was no shudder through the hull. The captain looked at the bow cameras. "We missed it? Did it dive?" "Negative," the sonar supervisor shouted from the Combat Information Center. "The contact is still there. It is inside our hull. Sir, the contact is moving through the ship." The admiral froze. "Explain." "The radar and sonar show the contact is occupying the same physical space as our forward fuel tanks," the supervisor said. "There is no damage, no alarms. It is simply passing through us." The ship did not slow down. The black object emerged from the stern of the Ford seconds later. It was completely untouched. It had drifted through 100,000 tons of steel and nuclear reactors as if the carrier were made of smoke. The voice returned. It was louder now. It came from every speaker on the ship, even the ones that were turned off. "The strait is closed. This is your final warning." 8:17 in the morning. The western edge of the Taiwan Strait. The Chinese Rear Admiral on the bridge of the cruiser Nanchang watched the digital playback of the American carrier. His eyes narrowed as he saw the radar track of the black object merge with the bay USS Gerald R. Ford, and then emerge from the other side. There had been no explosion. There had been no debris. "Report," the Chinese admiral commanded. "Did the American carrier sustain damage?" The sensor officer looked up from his console. His face was pale. "Negative, Admiral. Our thermal sensors showed no heat exchange during the transit. Our long-range cameras saw the object enter the bow and exit the stern. The American ship did not even slow down. It is as if the carrier did not exist to the object, or the object did not exist to the carrier." The Chinese admiral felt a cold weight in his chest. If this was a secret American project, the global balance of power had just vanished. If a ship could pass through solid matter, no wall or armor could stop it. "It is a holographic projection," he said, though he did not believe it. "They are using advanced electronic warfare to trick our sensors. We will not be intimidated. Target the nearest contact with our high-power laser. We will see if light can pass through it as easily as steel." 8:19 in the morning. The USS Gerald R. Ford. In the lower decks of the carrier, damage control teams were sprinting through the narrow corridors. They were checking every weld and every rivet in the forward fuel sections. The chief engineer spoke to the bridge over the internal circuit. "Admiral, there is no damage. We have checked the fuel levels. We have checked the hull plating. There is not a scratch, but the radiation counters spiked for 1 millisecond as the object passed through. It was not gamma or X-ray. It was a frequency we have never recorded." The admiral looked at the tactical map. The 14 black shapes were no longer sitting in a stationary line. They were moving with purpose. They were repositioning into two distinct groups of 7. 7 were moving toward the American strike group. 7 were accelerating toward the Chinese fleet. They are splitting the forces, the tactical action officer said. They are isolating us from the Chinese. Admiral, we are now being boxed in. Load the missiles, the admiral ordered. I want a rolling lock on all 7 targets in our sector. If they try to phase through us again, we will see if a kinetic warhead can find a solid surface to hit. We are not a ghost ship. We are a warship. 8:20 in the morning. The center of the strait. The nearest black teardrop. The beam was powerful enough to vaporize the hull of a smaller boat in seconds. On the monitors, the light hit the black surface and simply stopped. It did not reflect. It did not create heat. The black material seemed to drink the energy. The black object responded. It did not fire a missile. It did not return fire with a laser. It began to vibrate. The vibration was so intense that the water around the object turned into a fine, white mist. Within seconds, a wall of fog began to rise from the ocean surface. It climbed 500 feet into the air, obscuring the horizon and the American fleet. The fog was not natural. It was thick, it was cold, and it was impenetrable to radar. Inside the mist, the sonar on every ship began to scream. Multiple launches, the sonar supervisor on the Ford yelled. Not from the Chinese, from the water itself. We have hundreds of small, high-speed contacts breaking the surface inside the fog. The admiral gripped the edge of his seat. Identify them. Are they torpedoes? Negative, sir, the supervisor replied. They are not torpedoes. They are coming straight up. They are under us. They are everywhere. The morning sun was blocked by the rising wall of mist. The cage was closing. Both fleets were now trapped in a white void with an enemy they could not touch. 8:20 in the morning. Inside the wall of white mist, the world had narrowed to the size of a radar screen, not with voices, but with electronics. Every alarm in the Combat Information Center was active. The sonar supervisor had his hands pressed against his headset. He was trying to filter the chaos. Multiple inbound, he shouted. Low altitude. They are coming out of the water. Distance 500 meters, 400 meters. The captain turned to the tactical action officer. Engage with the close-in weapon system. Now. Negative, the officer yelled back. The CIWS cannot find a target. The radar is seeing the fog as a solid object. We are firing into a wall of water. The admiral did not sit. He stood at the center of the room. His jaw was locked. He watched the main tactical display. The 14 black icons were gone. In their place were hundreds of tiny, pulsing flickers. They were moving at speeds that should have caused a sonic boom. There was no sound. They are inside our defensive perimeter, the admiral said. His voice was the only calm thing in the room. The Howard and the Higgins. Status. The Howard is reporting a total systems failure, the communications officer replied. They have lost propulsion. The Higgins is dead in the water. Admiral, we are losing power on the forward bus. The lights in the Combat Information Center flickered. They dimmed to a deep, bloody red. The hum of the massive nuclear reactors changed pitch. It was a dying groan. The reactors are scabbing. The chief engineer's voice came over the emergency circuit. Something is drawing power directly from the core. We are losing the magnetic containment. Admiral, we have to shut down or we will have a breach. 8:21 in the morning. The Chinese cruiser Nanchang. The Chinese admiral was on his knees. The deck of the cruiser was vibrating with a frequency that made his teeth ache. It was a physical assault. Outside the bridge windows, the white fog was glowing. It was a pale, sickly green light that seemed to come from every direction at once. Launch the missiles, the admiral commanded. He was clutching the edge of a console. Fire everything. Blind fire. We must clear the air. The weapons officer struggled with his keyboard. The system is locked. I have a manual override failure. The missiles will not recognize the launch command. It is as if the ship is no longer mine. The sonar operator on the Nanchang screamed. He ripped his headset off and threw it on the floor. Blood was trickling from his ears. "The sound!" he cried. "It is not a sound. It is a voice. It is inside my head." The Chinese admiral looked at his own hands. They were glowing. A faint silver light was dancing between his fingers. He looked at the weapons officer. The man was frozen. Everyone on the bridge was frozen. They were not paralyzed by fear. They were physically locked in time. 8, 21, and 30 seconds. Back on the Ford, the captain reached for the trigger of the manual battery. His hand stopped 3 inches from the button. He could not move his muscles. He could see. He could breathe. But he was a statue. The admiral was the same. He was staring at the main screen. The hundreds of small contacts were no longer moving. They had formed a perfect sphere around the carrier. A cage of silver light. The vibration stopped. The alarms went silent. The red lights died. The ship was plunged into total, absolute darkness. There was no sound of the ocean. There was no sound of the wind. There was only the sound of 1,000 heartbeats, perfectly synchronized, echoing through the steel hull. The admiral felt a presence. It was not a person. It was a weight. It was a cold, vast intelligence that was looking through the ship as if it were made of glass. The voice did not come. It did not come from the radio. It came from the air itself. It was a vibration in the marrow of their bones. You are not ready. 8, 21, and 50 seconds in the morning. The center of the Taiwan Strait, the silver sphere around the USS Gerald R. Ford, did not explode. It did not collapse. It simply ceased to be light. In 1/1,000,000th of a second, the energy solidified. The hundreds of tiny flickers that had been buzzing the carrier like angry hornets stopped dead in the air. They did not slow down. They did not drift. They reached a full stop from a speed of Mach 5 in 0 seconds. Physics did not allow for this. Kinetic energy had to go somewhere. There was no heat bloom. There was no sonic boom. There was only a sudden and terrifying stillness. The admiral felt his muscles release. He could move his arms again. He could breathe. He looked at the main display. The icons were still there, but they were no longer pulsing. They were gray. "Report," the admiral gasped. His voice felt thin in the cold air of the Combat Information Center. The sonar supervisor was staring at his screen. "Admiral, the contacts. They have vanished from sonar, but I can see them on the optical cameras. They are just hanging there, 200 feet above the water. They are not using rotors. They are not using jets. They are ignoring gravity." The captain of the Ford was looking at the weapons status board. His face went white. "Admiral, look at the master arm switch." The admiral looked. The physical switch for the carrier's defensive systems was gone. It had not been flipped. It had not been broken. The metal had been smoothed over. Where the switch and the wiring had been, there was now only a seamless sheet of gray titanium. It was as if the weapon controls had never existed. "They edited the ship," the captain whispered. "They did not just disable the weapons. They removed the possibility of them." 8:22 in the morning. The Chinese cruiser Nanchang. The Chinese admiral was standing on his bridge. The green fog was gone. The silver light was gone. He looked out the forward window and saw the 7 black teardrops. They were floating in a perfect vertical line, 300 meters in front of his bow. "Prepare the forward gun," the Chinese admiral ordered. "Manual override. Fire a warning shot." The weapons officer did not move. He was staring at the gun turret on the bow. "Admiral, look at the barrel." The admiral grabbed a pair of binoculars. Through the lenses, he saw the 130mm naval gun. The barrel was no longer a hollow tube. It had been fused shut. The steel had flowed like wax and solidified into a solid, blunt cylinder. Every missile silo on the deck of the Nanchang was the same. The hatches were fused. The seams were gone. The most powerful cruiser in the Chinese Navy had been turned into a multi-billion-dollar paperweight. "They are not fighting us," the Chinese admiral said. He felt a sudden, hollow realization in his chest. "They are disarming us, like children with toy swords. The 14 contacts began to vibrate again. But this time, the sound was not a scream. It was a chord, a deep, resonant tone that felt like a bell being struck at the bottom of the ocean. Every radio on every ship in the strait began to hum. On the Ford, on the Nanchang, on the destroyers and the submarines. The hum resolved into a single, clear frequency. Digital displays on every bridge flickered. The tactical maps disappeared. They were replaced by a single image. It was a map of the Earth, but it was not a map they recognized. There were no borders. There were no names of countries. There were only hundreds of red dots. Each red dot corresponded exactly to a known nuclear silo, a ballistic missile submarine, or a secondary launch site. The admiral on the Ford watched as the red dots began to blink. One by one, they turned green. They are inside the Global Command and Control Network, the tactical action officer said. His voice was trembling. Admiral, they are not just in the strait. They are everywhere. They are in the silos in Montana. They are in the mountains in China. They are in the Russian plains. The voice returned. It was no longer flat. It was resonant. It was authoritative. The era of the projectile is over. 8:23 in the morning. The Taiwan Strait. The Combat Information Center of the USS Gerald R. Ford was a room full of ghosts. Men and women who had spent their lives mastering the art of modern warfare sat before consoles that no longer obeyed them. The admiral watched the global map on the main screen. Hundreds of green dots pulsed in a steady, rhythmic cycle. Every nuclear-tipped missile in the American inventory. Every silo in North Dakota. Every submarine in the Atlantic. Every bomber on the tarmac in Guam. Admiral, the tactical action officer said. His voice was hollow. I just received a flash priority signal from National Command Authority via the backup satellite link. It is not just us. The entire Pentagon is in a state of total system lockout. They cannot launch. They cannot even target. The president has been moved to the bunker, but the bunker doors are fused shut. The admiral did not look away from the screen. And the Chinese? The same, the officer replied. Our intelligence feeds are still partially active. The Chinese Strategic Rocket Force is reporting a total software collapse. Their mobile launchers are dead in the mud. Their command codes have been replaced by the same green pulse. The admiral sat down in his command chair. He felt a strange, detached sense of relief. The burden of the world's destruction had been taken out of his hands. They did not come here to start a war, he said. They came here to end the possibility of one. 8:24 in the morning. The Chinese cruiser Nanchang. The Chinese admiral stood on the bridge of his crippled ship. He was watching the 7 black teardrops. They were no longer vibrating. They were silent. They were waiting. Admiral, the chief of staff whispered. The engines are responding. We have propulsion. The navigation systems are back online. The admiral looked at the fused barrel of his main gun. And the weapons? Nothing, the officer said. The fire control computers have been wiped. There is no backup. There is no manual mode. We are a transport ship now. Nothing more. The Chinese admiral looked toward the east, where the American carrier was a dark smudge on the horizon. For decades, the two nations had danced on the edge of a knife in these waters. They had built faster missiles and quieter submarines. They had spent trillions of dollars to ensure they could kill each other more efficiently. And in 9 minutes, it had all been rendered as obsolete as a stone axe. Turn the ship, the Chinese admiral ordered. Head for Hainan Island. Sir, the chief of staff asked, we are retreating? There is no one to fight, the admiral replied. The enemy is not the Americans. The enemy is a power that considers us both irrelevant. We are going home to tell the emperor that the sky has changed. Back on the Ford, the captain looked at the admiral. Sir, the 14 contacts are moving again. They are converging. The black teardrops from the eastern and western sectors of the strait began to accelerate. They did not move toward the ships. They moved toward the center of the strait, halfway between the two fleets. The hundreds of small silver spheres followed them, trailing like the tail of a comet. As they met, the water began to glow. It was a deep, ultraviolet light that reached down into the depths. The sonar on the Ford caught a single, massive acoustic return. It was not a ship, it was a doorway, the sonar supervisor shouted. "Admiral, the seabed is opening. There is a massive structural displacement on the floor of the strait. It is a hangar. It has been there for a long time." The admiral leaned forward. "How long?" "The silt layers," the supervisor said, his voice trembling. "The computer is analyzing the sediment. That structure has been under the strait for at least 50,000 years." The 14 black objects began to descend. They were going home. 8:25 in the morning, the center of the Taiwan Strait. The ocean floor was no longer a graveyard of shipwrecks and ancient silt. It was a machine. Under the crushing pressure of 300 feet of salt water, a geometric iris of black stone had unfolded. It was 2 miles wide. The sonar operator on the USS Gerald R. Ford watched his screen in disbelief. The digital rendering showed a structure that defied every known principle of engineering. It was not built, it was grown. The 14 black teardrops descended in a perfect, silent spiral. They moved with a synchronized grace that suggested a single mind was controlling them all. One by one, they passed through the threshold of the iris. Behind them, the hundreds of silver spheres followed, like a swarm of metallic bees returning to a hive. The sonar supervisor spoke into his headset. His voice was a whisper. "They are inside. The iris is closing. Displacement is returning to zero. The seabed is resetting itself." The admiral on the Ford watched the live feed from a deep-sea drone. The black stone petals of the iris slid back into place. The silt and sand of the strait began to settle. Within seconds, the anomaly was gone. The sonar return showed nothing but a flat, featureless plain of mud. It was as if the last 10 minutes had been a collective hallucination. 8:27 in the morning. The Pentagon, in Washington, D.C. The National Military Command Center was a room filled with frozen men. The Joint Chiefs of Staff stood before the main strategic wall. Every screen was still showing the global map of green dots. Every nuclear weapon on Earth was still under a foreign lock. The most powerful nation in history was a spectator to its own potential end. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs spoke into a dead telephone. "Try the manual landlines again. I want to know if a single silo can still talk to us." "Sir," an analyst said, his voice was cracking. "The green dots are changing. They are no longer just green. They are starting to pulse in a specific sequence. It looks like a countdown." The chairman looked at the map. The green pulses were accelerating. "How much time?" 3 minutes, the analyst replied. "If this is a launch sequence, we have 3 minutes until the world ends, and we cannot stop it." 8:28 in the morning. Beijing. The Great Hall of the People. The leadership of the Central Military Commission sat in a darkened bunker. They were watching the same map, the same countdown. The silence was absolute. There were no arguments. There were no orders to give. They were watching the clock of their own civilization run out. The Chinese president looked at his generals. "We spent 50 years preparing for a war with the West. We never considered that the board itself was alive. If they wanted to destroy us, they would have done it 10 minutes ago. This is not a launch." "Then what is it?" a general asked. "It is a reset," the president said. 8:30 in the morning. The Taiwan Strait. The countdown on the bridges of the Ford and the Nanchang reached zero. The green dots on every screen in the world flashed once. It was a blinding white light that filled the rooms. Then, every monitor went black. A second later, the systems rebooted. The familiar blue and gold interfaces of the American Aegis combat system returned. The red and black displays of the Chinese command suite flickered to life. "Power is back," the chief engineer on the Ford shouted. "Reactors are at 60% and climbing. We have propulsion. We have steering." The tactical action officer checked his console with trembling fingers. "Admiral, the master arm switch. It is back. The metal has unfused. The wiring is intact. The weapons are online. We are a warship again." The admiral looked at his hands. They were no longer glowing. He looked out at the water. The strait was empty. The 14 black objects were gone. The silver spheres were gone. The ocean was just gray water and white foam. He keyed the fleet-wide broadcast. All ships, this is Strike Group Command. Hold your fire. Do not cycle weapons. I repeat, do not engage. We are going to sit right here. We are going to wait. And we are going to remember what we just saw. The crisis in the strait had resolved, but the crisis for humanity was just beginning. 8:35 in the morning. The Taiwan Strait. The sky had returned to a pale, indifferent blue. The wall of mist had evaporated as quickly as it had formed. On the bridge of the United States ship Gerald R. Ford, the admiral watched the horizon. Through his binoculars, he could see the gray silhouette of the Chinese cruiser Nanchang. It was sitting motionless, 3 miles away. For decades, these two ships represented the ultimate expression of human conflict. Now, they looked like relics. The captain of the Ford broke the silence. Admiral, the Howard and the Higgins report full systems restoration. Engineering says the reactors are stable at 85%. We are fully operational. The admiral did not turn around. And the weapons? All systems report green. The captain said. The master arm is back. The missiles are in their cells. The software is clean. It is as if the last 15 minutes never happened. Except for the gun barrels, the admiral said. The Nanchang still has a fused main gun. They were the only ones who fired. They were the only ones who were physically edited. The admiral walked over to the communication station. Open a bridge-to-bridge channel. Wide broadcast. No encryption. I want the Chinese to hear this. I want everyone to hear this. The communications officer nodded. Channel is open, sir. The admiral spoke into the handset. His voice was steady. This is the commander of the United States Carrier Strike Group. To the commander of the People's Liberation Army Navy forces in the Strait, we have experienced a non-standard tactical event. We have no hostile intent. We are maintaining our current position to conduct damage assessment. We suggest a mutual stand-down. Confirm. There was a long pause. The static on the radio was the only sound in the room. Then, a voice came back. It was the Chinese admiral. His English was formal and accented. This is the Nanchang. We confirm. We have no hostile intent. We are also conducting an assessment. The strait is quiet. We agree to the stand down. The radio went silent. There was no cheering on the bridge. There was no sense of victory. The crew moved with a slow, mechanical precision. They were professionals, and they were in shock. 8:42 in the morning. The seabed. A remote-operated vehicle from the destroyer Howard reached the coordinates where the Black Iris had opened. The camera feed was transmitted back to the fleet. The screen showed a flat, featureless desert of gray silt. There were no marks, there were no edges. The sonar pings returned a solid, shallow floor of rock and sand. The sonar supervisor on the Ford watched the feed. There is nothing there. We are looking at 50 feet of sediment that has not been disturbed in 10,000 years. The readings we had 5 minutes ago are gone. The computer says the displacement never occurred. The computer is lying, the admiral said. Or it has been told to forget. But we saw it. We saw the countdown. We saw the green dots. 8:45 in the morning. The flag bridge. The admiral looked at the digital clock. It had been 11 minutes since the world's nuclear arsenal had been returned to human control. 11 minutes since the black teardrops vanished. He turned to his chief of staff. Send a message to 7th Fleet. Flash priority. Tell them the transit of the strait is complete. We are moving to the Philippine Sea for a full technical debrief. And tell them we need a new classification for what happened here today. What classification, Admiral? The Chief of Staff asked. The Admiral looked out at the empty water. An intervention. This was not an engagement, it was an intervention. 9 o'clock in the morning. The two fleets began to move. They did not turn toward each other. They did not shadow each other. The American carrier group turned east. The Chinese cruisers turned west. They moved away from the center of the strait like two predators that had been frightened by a much larger shadow. The morning was still quiet. The war that had been coming for a century had been stopped by a power that did not even bother to identify itself. 11:45 in the morning. The Pentagon. The room known as the tank was filled with a thick and suffocating tension. The Secretary of Defense sat at the head of the mahogany table. On the massive digital screen was a high-resolution photograph of the USS Gerald R. Ford, taken from an RQ-4 Global Hawk drone just 1 hour ago. The ship looked perfect. It sat in the blue water of the Philippine Sea, like a monument to industrial might. But the data arriving from the fleet told a different story. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff cleared his throat. He did not look at the secretary. He looked at his own hands. "Mr. Secretary, we have completed the first pass of the digital forensics on the Ford and its escorts. The results are technically impossible. Every bit of data recorded between 8:04 and 8:30 in the morning has been scrubbed from every hard drive in the strike group. It was not simply deleted. The data was overwritten with a repeating sequence of prime numbers that extends to the billionth digit." The secretary leaned forward. His voice was a harsh whisper. "And the crews? We have 5,000 sailors on that carrier. We have the admiral. We have the pilots who were in the air. Are you telling me they have nothing? The human memory is intact," the general replied. "But the technical evidence is gone. We have no radar tracks of the 14 contacts. We have no recordings of the voice. We have no sensor logs of the whiteout, except for one thing. Our nuclear forensic teams found a micro layer of an unknown isotope on the exterior of the hull of every ship in the strait. It is emitting a low-frequency pulse that matches the frequency of the green light, reported by the crews. It is a signature. It is a watermark on a document that we cannot read." "What is the president's directive?" the secretary asked. "The president wants silence," the general said. "He has already spoken to the leadership in Beijing on the secure line. For the first time in 30 years, we are in total agreement with the Chinese. This event cannot be made public. If the world knows that the entire global nuclear deterrent can be switched off like a library lamp, the global economy will collapse in an afternoon. The concept of national sovereignty would vanish. We are calling it a massive solar flare combined with a regional electronic warfare test that went out of control. We are blaming a software glitch in the Aegis system." 3 days later, Beijing. The Great Hall of the People was cold and cavernous. The Chinese rear admiral who had commanded the Nanchang stood before a committee of 6 silent men. On the table between them sat a heavy piece of dark metal. It was the end of the 130mm gun barrel that had been cut off by a diamond-tipped industrial saw. The admiral spoke with his head slightly bowed. "The molecular structure of the steel has been fundamentally altered. Our materials scientists have never seen anything like it. It is no longer a forged alloy. The steel has been converted into a single, continuous crystal of pure iron at the atomic level. There is no way to reverse the process. The weapon was not jammed by a mechanical failure. It was physically reimagined as a solid, useless object." The committee leader looked at the iron crystal. "And the Americans? Have they maintained the cover story?" "They are following the script perfectly," the admiral said. "They are blaming the sun. They are blaming our provocations. We are blaming their experimental drones. The public is satisfied with the lie, because it is familiar. It is easier for the world to believe in a war that almost happened than a power that made the very idea of war look pathetic." "And the site? The opening in the seabed? We have 4 attack submarines sitting over the coordinates," the admiral said. "The Americans have 6. We are all watching a desert. There has been no movement. No sound. The sonar shows a flat, ancient floor of silt. The iris remains closed, but the temperature of the water at that depth has risen by 4 degrees. Something is still generating heat down there. Something is still awake." The committee leader stood up. "The Taiwan Strait is no longer a strategic asset. It is a cage. We will move our naval exercises to the Yellow Sea. We will not disturb whatever is sleeping in that trench again. We are not ready for a second lesson." The admiral nodded. He thought of the voice that had vibrated in his own skull. "You are not ready." He realized now that it was not a threat. It was a statement of fact. Humanity was a child that had just been told to put down a loaded gun by an adult who was finally tired of the noise. The world went back to its routines. The stock markets stabilized. The politicians returned to their rhetoric. But in the secret vaults of the two most powerful nations on Earth, the truth was being buried under miles of red tape. The morning was still, but it was a different kind of stillness. 2 months later, the Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island. The lecture hall was dimly lit and smelled of old paper and floor wax. A retired admiral stood at the lectern. He was not there to talk about the history of the Pacific or the carrier battles of the Second World War. He was there to deliver a classified briefing to a group of 20 senior officers. On the screen behind him was a satellite image of the Taiwan Strait. It was a beautiful, clear blue. There were no ships in the center of the image. What we call the event of March 26th has redefined the concept of national security, the admiral began. For a century, we believed that the ocean was a theater for human competition. We believed that whoever had the quietest submarine or the fastest missile owned the depths. We were wrong. We were like ants fighting over a grain of sand on the deck of a battleship. He clicked a remote. A chart appeared showing the new maritime exclusion zones. Both Washington and Beijing had quietly agreed to a 50-mile radius around the coordinates where the iris had opened. It was the only place on Earth where the two superpowers cooperated without friction. They were not cooperating out of friendship. They were cooperating out of a shared, primal fear. Our strategic assessment is simple, the admiral continued. The 14 contacts did not just disarm a strike group. They demonstrated a total mastery over the fundamental forces of the universe. They edited the molecular structure of our weapons. They bypassed our digital encryption. They entered our nuclear command and control systems as if they were reading an open book. Most importantly, they did not kill a single person. They were not cruel. They were merely efficient. In the back of the room, a young commander raised his hand. Sir, if they have been there for 50,000 years, why did they wait until now to intervene? The admiral sighed. The consensus among the analysts is that we reached a threshold. On that morning, the tactical computer on the USS Gerald R and the fire control system on the Nanchang were both within 10 seconds of authorizing a kinetic exchange. We were about to start a war that would have escalated to a global nuclear conflict in less than 6 hours. They did not intervene because they care about our politics. They intervened because we were about to set the house on fire. 600 miles off the coast of California, the USS Gerald R. was back on a training cruise. The flight deck was busy. The roar of the jet engines was a constant, comforting thunder. But inside the Combat Information Center, the atmosphere was different. The sonar supervisor was no longer looking for enemy submarines. He was looking at the bottom of the ocean. He was looking for the heartbeats. The admiral who had commanded the fleet during the event was now a civilian. He sat on a porch in a small coastal town in Maine. He watched the tide come in. He thought about the voice in his head. You are not ready. He realized that the voice was right. Humanity was a species defined by its projectiles. From the first sharpened stone to the latest hypersonic missile, the entire history of human power was the history of throwing things at one another. And in 9 minutes, a power that did not need to throw anything had rendered that history a joke. He looked out at the Atlantic. The water was dark and deep. He knew that somewhere down there, in the silent trenches, the watchers were still waiting. They were not our enemies. They were not our friends. They were the custodians of a peace that we were too violent to maintain ourselves. The admiral picked up a smooth stone from the beach. He looked at it for a long time. Then, instead of throwing it into the water, he placed it back on the sand. The era of the projectile is over, he whispered to the wind. The world was still at peace, not because it had found wisdom, but because it had found its limit. In the silence of the Taiwan Strait, the greatest secret in human history remained buried under 50 feet of silt. And for the first time in 10,000 years, the humans were content to let it stay there. The morning was quiet, and for now, that was enough.